All right, this is David Turner for this my course, CSE 322 Web Page Programming in the year 2016. I'm going to talk about this assignment here, Ajax. And Ajax is a way for code running in the browser written in JavaScript to communicate with code running on the server side, written in whatever language you use on the server side. In this class, we're not writing anything on the server side, but what we can do is pretend like we have something running. We can use Ajax to retrieve static files, so that's good enough. And I think, yeah, that's right. So what I want to do with this video is to talk about Ajax and explain what it is and sort of show you this code here, talk about this, maybe develop this a step at a time, and also a little bit about this. It's not a big deal. Oh, we do have some code that runs on the server side. Just to show that to you, we've got a little piece of PHP code that we can use to demonstrate that. And then, so I want to talk about all of that so you understand the what Ajax is and how to use it in a web application. And then your task would be to carry out these instructions, which is to access and use this the GitHub Markdown API. So this is an API. A lot of these big sites like GitHub and Facebook and Google and so on, so many of them, even the small sites are providing these interfaces for developers to interact with their services. And in GitHub they have this wiki system like this. My web page here is written in Markdown language, like here. So I edit this this web page. You see these two sharp symbols followed by background. Well, that's translated into the an H2 element, and so this will generate that code right there. So rather than typing this, it's easier to type this, and also this is easier to read in source code format. So the idea of Markdown languages, we want the text to be more readable as source code. Like here's a link, read about, and you can see this this bracket here. That's a description that appears in the link, and then it's followed by parentheses, and that's the URL that you go to when you click the link. And then you've got things like this underscore. See that underscore? An underscore there. Everything in between those two underscores is italicized. So basically we insert. Well, maybe it's not I think it's emphasis. I think it does something, not emphasis, but yeah, maybe emphasis. I think it inserts this HTML in there. Okay, but once again, it's easier to type just underscores than it is to type those opening and closing tags. These three tildes together, they open up a code block, and the next set of tildes close that code block. So all of the code inside here is then converted into a pre-element. This is what that's what the Markdown processor does. It takes this, replaces this by an opening pre-tag, and replaces this with a closing pre-tag. That means pre-formatted text. So what do you call it? A font that's not variable width font. It's what do they call it? Like Courier, for instance, is a font that doesn't have variable widths. It's a fixed width font. So that's good for source code, and so on. So that's to show you what I mean by Markdown right here. So task is to create a web page where the user enters in Markdown text into a text area element here. And then when the user clicks submit, the Markdown is sent to the GitHub Markdown API, and with the request, please convert this into HTML for me, and then it returns the HTML, and then you insert that into the web page. And that's what you need to do for that. So let me talk about this Ajax business. And so I give this file here, it's called ajax.js. Let's go ahead and create that. I'll need a folder for this. So make directory mkdir ajax. And let's create that file. It's called ajax.js. I might as well make this big. And of course, we're going to also need the HTML file. I'll call it index.html. There it is. And we'll need another file here, what we call ajax-data.json. ajax-data.json. This is JavaScript object notation, JSON. It's a very common format now. You really pretty much need to know that format to work in cloud computing. So that's just, see, it looks like a JavaScript object, right? It's got the closing brace, the opening brace, and in there are the name value pairs. There's the name of the attribute, MSG, and here's the value, hello. And so that's there. And by the way, we better start the web server, Apache 2. And I need to know the address, echo $C9 host name. Let's go ahead and test this. So we started the web server. So this is the Ajax folder. And we had that Ajax data.json. We put it in there as a file. There it is. It's just showing up as text. Well, as you can see, I'm just testing to see that we can access that information here. Let's see what else there is. Here's the web page that uses the Ajax code in ajax.js. It uses that to retrieve ajax-data.json. So we have, I'm leaving out all that other stuff. You could put that in there, HTML. It still works without it. Modern browsers, maybe they like it, but they don't require it. And we have the container element here. See, that's a closing tag there. I mean, it's self-closing. And then, so it's empty. So this is a blank web page. And then we have this script. We're going to load ajax.js. That's what we have here. We already know that we can load that. Ajax.js. So we can load that in the browser. We can request it in the browser just like we request this in the web page, because we just see it like this. And so this Ajax.js code is loaded. And then we have some internal script that's embedded in the HTML file. And I put this here because I'm telling the Cloud9 text editor that Ajax is a global variable. See, the text editor is smart in the sense that it does these color coding. You see that these are different colors. This is, and it's parsing it's parsing the text and color coding it and doing other things which are useful. But if we didn't include this line 6 in there, then we get a warning. See that? Ajax is not defined. It's actually reading, it's actually parsing the JavaScript here. It knows this is JavaScript. This is the Cloud9 editor. It knows this is JavaScript, and it's giving us a warning there. So I'm going to, and if you can read the warning, it says, please fix or add, global Ajax in a comment, and that's what we're doing. So I'm going to undo that. So this is not read by the browser. This is read by, Cloud9's text editor. So let's see what's next. We use document.getElementBy with the ID of the container div, and then we get a reference to that. So container is a reference to this div. And then we call the Ajax function, which got defined here. This is where it is. Just going to collapse that down. This is the Ajax function. It's a global function. And it retrieves something, and then it gives it to your code. Now, how does it retrieve it? Look, this is the URL of the object that needs to be retrieved, ajax-data.json. We already saw how to get that in the browser directly. So we want the Ajax function to grab that document string, which is returned to this Ajax function as a string. And the second argument is data that we need to pass to this named resource here in the first argument. We're not passing any information in order to get the JSON document to us. So we just set null there. And then the third, there's a comma there, the third argument to Ajax, I'm going to highlight it exactly, is that function. See that? And that's called a callback function. So when Ajax is going to run, this Ajax function will run, it'll go and request a JSON file, and then we have to wait for it. It takes time to get the data. When the data comes back, then we're going to invoke this callback function, and the system will invoke the callback function and pass in the response to this argument, RESP. So we could have described this differently. We could have done it a little differently. We could have declared that function, say here. We could do function, handle response. And here's the response, okay? And then, so we got our function in there, and it's a one-liner. And now, when we call this Ajax function, we just pass in the reference to handle response. There you go, let's spell it right. Maybe that's easier to look at. So we call a function Ajax with 3 arguments. So you can think of this, in C or C++ terms, that's a function pointer. In JavaScript, it's a reference to a function. And the function is defined up here, right there. Now this function is globally scoped. Is it going to give us a warning? No. It's not nice to be globally scoped, so you will see normally, and also container is globally scoped. We don't really want that. So normally we do this. I didn't want to make things messy for everybody, but this is the clean way to do it. And so we define a function and invoke it all in one breath there. So we wrap everything. This is how to give a block of code to keep it from declaring things that go in the global scope. So that's the clean way to do it. Once again, I didn't want to distract people from the main issues here. So we get the container, define the function handle request, then we invoke this Ajax function. So when this data comes in, this handler will run. The data that's being returned will come in through this RSP variable. So this RSP variable, response, which is short for response, is going to be because we retrieve JSON, it's going to be, well, the way we wrote the code, by the way, we're returning a JSON object. And the JSON object, as you can see here, that it'll return a JavaScript object. The JavaScript object has a single field, MSG, for message, which is set to some string. So we can access that string by using the dot notation. So this is the object reference dot MSG. That's the attribute name, MSG. So this, what I have highlighted here, resolved to the value, hello in this case. So we take hello and we pass it to the create text node function of the document object. And we looked at this in the earlier exercise. Where was that? In the DOM. Oh, so you just did this, right? You would have just done this. Here it is. This was covered in the second tutorial. So we create that text node, and then we append it to the container by calling append child. So let me see that dot there. I need to save this thing. All right, let's see if it works. Now Apache's already running, so we just go ahead and request this index.html file. Index.html in the Ajax folder. See, it says hello. So it doesn't say hello anywhere in there. That's because it appears in this div. It's the same as doing, basically it's inserting it into this container, this div. So that's working. So to change that hello, we would put it in here. This would be, bye, say. So when we reload this web page, should say bye. There it is. Now, now the question is how does this Ajax function work? I mean, that's what we did. So this was handcrafted just for our web applications, and different web applications will maybe have different requirements. Like in this application, I'm assuming that an HTTP post will always be used. So you can't call this Ajax function if you want to use an HTTP GET. So you'd have to create your own code, separate code to do that. And it also, so the function, this Ajax function assumes that all data is sent and received. All data that is sent and received is in the form of a JSON encoded object. All right, so the data to send comes in as the second argument. Remember, the second argument here is null because we don't have any data to send. So that's there in case we do want to send something. Well, actually, when you send data to the GitHub API, you will need to send data. So here, you'll need to send data to this URL. This URL. Now you won't need to modify this, I don't believe. You need to come up with this code. So rather than calling this URL, you're going to need to call that URL. Call a URL. So that's how that works. Let's go back to here. Here's the handler. This is the callback. That's it's the request handler. So we're the ones initiating a request. We're sending a request to the server. When we get a response, we want our handler code to be given this response object that comes back to us. So to do that, we create this, this XML Httprequest object. So what I have highlighted here is a constructor function. We use it with the new operator to get a reference to a new object which was created out of this constructor function. If the object is null, if the reference to the object is null, it means we've got a browser that doesn't support this. And we're just going to say, you know, browser not supported. Most browsers support this now. There's some old Internet Explorer versions that that this won't work on. Version 7 or 8, I don't know which one it is. But if you're concerned about old versions of Internet Explorer, then you can add some code here that performs an alternative activity. But I decided to simplify this and cut out that code. So after we create this request object, then we're going to set some of its properties. And one property that it has is called onReadyStateChange. Now this is a property. What this property is a function reference. It's a reference to a function that's going to be invoked whenever this request object changes its state. So it's like it's a you know, when you contact the remote server, then you send it a message, then you wait for a response. The response is streaming back in. You're gathering the bytes as they stream into the client, and then finally it got the connection is complete, or the message is complete. So each time this activity of requesting and retrieving data from the server, different points in that activity correspond to these state changes. We're only interested in the last state change, which is actually the number. It's represented by the number 4, but that's this is a readable way to represent that state value. So this object, XML Httprequest object, has an attribute called done, and they have 2 other attributes, probably in all caps, just like this, to represent the other states. But as far as I know, nobody uses the other states. They all look for the final state. Okay, I've never seen code that, other than just code for demonstration purposes. I've never seen code that makes use of any other state. So basically, we're going to be looking for that. So and the state comes through when this callback function is invoked. When this function here, when that's invoked to inform of a state change, it doesn't pass the new state in as an argument. It includes the state data as a part of this ready state attribute. And by the way, this is a reference to the request object that that is processing this Ajax message. So I could have just put request there like that. That's the same thing because it's the same name up there. But I'm using this because I don't know. Maybe it's more readable. It might be more flexible if you use this code in some other context. So if the state change handler runs and the state is not done, or 4, the number 4 actually, if it's not done, then we do nothing. So the only time we do something is when ready state equals the number 4. And in that case, we execute this code here. So we check the status value. So the status is the code that's returned from the web server. 200 means everything is good. So that's the normal status code. If it's a 300, that means there's some problem with the request. A 500, whatever, is some kind of server-side request error, and 400 is some other, I believe, server-side error, like a 404 not found. You know, if we put in something like we want Ajax data 7, for instance, that doesn't exist. So the server's going to send us a not found response. Right, so it'll do something like this. Say, so we do index HTML X, right? That doesn't exist. If we request it, it says not found. You see that? It doesn't give the code in here, but if you dig in, actually, if you dig in and look at it, you will see. There it is. Failed to load the resource. The server responded with a status of 404. So that's the numeric value that's used to indicate that the object, that the service that you're trying to access doesn't exist. So that's an example where the status would be not 200. So let's see, what would happen if it's not 200? This is if it's 200, we do this, right? Else, if it's not 200, then we're going to do line 29, all right? So here, we don't handle, because this is generic code. This is ajax.js. We designed this to handle this is the boilerplate code that handles all the requests. But it's not designed to handle error messages other than to pass the error message to the handler that got passed into us. So there's the handler. So we let the handler know that the result is an error. And the message is there was a problem with the request. We're not giving any more information than that. We're not saying it was a 404 or whatever. If that becomes an issue for you, then you can start, doing some debugging and displaying what the status code is, whatnot. So let's assume that the status is a 200. Then this block of code runs right there. So what do? Well, the request object now has an attribute called response text, which is now filled, which is now a reference to the string data that the server sent back to us. Remember, that's the string data. So this whole thing, it looks like a document because we're in a text editor, but actually it's just a string. It's a sequence of characters, and this string is existing, in memory, and this dot response text is a reference to that string. So string objects in JavaScript have a trim function. That means remove the leading and trailing white spaces, or blanks and tabs. So let's trim it, just in case they sent a blank. The server may have sent a blank line. Maybe there was some blank spaces in there. And then check the length. If it was only white space, it was either response text could have been, of 0 characters. It was still a string. So trim doesn't do anything in that case. But if it had a space in there or several spaces, trim would shorten it down to an empty string, and then dot length will be 0. So we're testing to see, by doing dot length equals 0, we're testing to see that we have an empty string. That means we didn't get any data from the user, from the web server. So what we'll do there is we're going to create an object right here. I've highlighted it. That's a JavaScript object. We're going to pass that to the handler, just to tell the handler that we got a response, but that's it. We didn't get any data in there. So that'll be a valid response. And then we return. We're done. Once we call the handler, we're done. All right, now let's suppose that this is false, that the response text is not an empty string. Then we're going to assume that the response text, which we refer to here, is a JSON encoded object. And that's what we have, of course. And so that means we can pass it to the parse method of this JSON object. So JSON.parse, that's a built-in function in JavaScript. So it'll take a string and produce a JavaScript object out of it. And RSP here, which is declared up there, the response object, that's a reference to the JavaScript object that was parsed out of the string. Now, the parsing, if this is an invalid JSON code, then the parse method will throw an exception. We're going to catch it here. So we've got this call in a try-catch block. So if there's a parse exception, we're going to catch it, and we're going to tell the handler that the result is an error, just like down here. We called the handler and told the result was an error. But the message here, we said there's some problem with the request, but here we want to say that that we know more about the error. We know that it was a JSON parse exception. And then we'll also, we'll give it that message, which will, maybe we're going to print it to the console, but that's up to the calling code to do what they want with this. And they're going to append onto it the response text so the programmer can see, oh, yeah, that's not a JSON object. We did something wrong on the server side. All right, so I'm going to take a short break, then I'm going to come back and